Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host Clara, and joining me today is KASEY Schweiker. KASEY is a holistic practitioner for the last 22 years with a focus on herbalism, plant medicine, sound therapy, astrology, and other subtle energy modalities. She currently lives in the Amazon outside of Tarapoto in Peru in a healing retreat center called La Medicina, which is a center that utilizes the traditional medicines of the Shipibo tribes. I am so excited about this conversation we're going to have with her today. Hey, KASEY.
It's really lovely to be here, Clara. Thank you for inviting me onto your podcast today.
Yeah, it's so good that you could join us today. I'm really glad we can have this chat with you being in Peru as well. I'm just going to warn the listeners the connection might be touch and go in the area that KASEY is in Tarapoto. So, yeah, let's see. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we can record this. Okay. And let's start with you, KASEY. Tell us a little bit more about your personal story, how you go into plant medicine, psychedelics, and healing.
Herbalism for me started probably when I was around 20 years old, a little over 20 years ago, when allopathic medicine, traditional, Western medicine was failing me due to some health conditions and health ailments, and looking for other solutions to heal my physical body, but also my mental and emotional body. And through that, I found, traditional herbal practices, like more like folk medicine from the States as well as Europe. And then went down some rabbit holes with Ayurveda, Chinese medicine. And that kind of started the path of just understanding that there's other modalities out there that also have a pretty long track record with traditional peoples, not just only in the United States where I'm from, but from different places around the planet and around the globe. So that's kind of where it started. And the realm of psychedelics, well, that's a whole other complicated story from being a young exploratory child, wanting to push the boundaries of my own understandings, but also working through different types of teenage angst and depression and things that, maybe we do when we're younger that aren't as healthy. But then on back to that healing track, in my early to mid 20s, I was invited to some more traditional underground healing circles in the United States that focused on plant medicines for healing as well as consciousness expansion, and decided to take that opportunity to see these from another lens as opposed to recreational use. And in that time and in that opportunity, I had some profound shifts in my day-to-day life, in my own healing path, and I've never looked back.
Right. Thanks for sharing that, KASEY. I bet that a lot of listeners, me included, can actually see similar steps that they've taken, with especially with psychedelics and potentially doing them more recreationally earlier in life, and then going into plant medicine circles and starting to work with psychedelic medicine and plant medicine in a more intentional way, in a more conscious way, and then never looking back, like you said, it's once you've done it in a certain way and you've seen the benefits and what it can do, then it's a whole matter of really starting to honor the medicine and have a certain kind of reverence for the whole process and for the medicine itself as well, and whoever serves it. So we're gonna move on to that now. At La Medicina, where Stacey works, they specialize in Shipibo, traditional Shipibo healing. So there are some maestros there who are amazing. I went there earlier this year. That's my connection with KASEY. I went to La Medicina. And the Shipibo have their own special way of healing with Brahmada ayahuasca and a lot of other plants as well. That's just one of the plants. It's a master plant that they use in the healing ceremonies. And they also do extensive dietas. We'll be talking about that as well in this podcast. But first, I'd like to talk about the ceremonies, how the Shipibo hold the ceremonies in their own special way. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you do there at La Medicina.
So we work here with the Shipibo. It's actually Shipibo Kanibo tribe. They live roughly about 16 to 20 hours away from here by bus, deeper into the Amazon, into the basin area, up by the Ucayali River. And so with that, there's many different peoples in Peru that work with the medicine, but through their lens, there's a deeper connection with animism, that all plants have spirit, all plants have energy. There's deep mythology as the way we see it from the West, but as they see it, it's part of the everyday life. We typically will look at that as like folklore or folk medicines, but for them, it is the pharmacopoeia of their way of being, the pharmacy, their drugstore, their way of going and finding remedies for solutions that come up not only in the physical body, but the mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. And so they work not just with ayahuasca, but with many different types of healing plants for all different types of ailments. So that's one thing to note. Because sometimes when people, I feel like, look at different indigenous tribes that work with ayahuasca, they primarily think, oh, they just work with ayahuasca, and that's not the case. Working with ayahuasca is just one of the many healing tools in their repertoire for people to find a whole body sense of being. So that's just a little bit about their lens, and there's a whole deep history and story around the ways in which they see the world. It's a very different cosmology than our world that we see in the Western world. That can get pretty deep and very intricate. But there's many layers to that. But in the sense of working with people like ourselves, that's only been going on probably since around, the late 50s, 60s, 70s, when more Westerners were coming down to the Amazon for alternative healing. And it's adapted its ways since then. And it's a constant adaptation on how the ceremonies do take place. The traditional use was a lot of times when people would come for different healings, it was the curanderos, which means healer, would be the ones ingesting these medicines and maybe only giving herbal plant remedies to the people. And they would sing to them through their form of icaros, which are roughly healing songs or transmissions. Sonic sound transmissions is a good way of saying it. That can be melodies that have been passed down generationally, from mother to daughter or father to son, grandparents to so on down the line. It also can be a song that the plants teach them when they do what you briefly brought up, these long-term diets or dietas, where they go into isolation to do their own healing process and to hopefully open themselves up to the energetics of the plants, and sometimes receive these types of healing songs. Otherwise, sometimes they are just transmissions, like a freestyle, is what we would call it, in the moment, healing specifically for you and your energetic body. So they work with plants, they work with ayahuasca, and they work with sound for people to receive a healing transmission. One of the ways to look at it is like we are an arrangement of atoms, ions, and molecules within our body, and we have this innate blueprint. And sometimes because of life and the way that, modernity, stress, just the comings and goings of being a human in our modern world, the toll it takes on us, that blueprint that we're born into can get holes, it can get porous. And when they work with us with this combination of plants and sound, it helps repair those holes. It helps us come back into a complete, pattern that's a little bit more refined, is one way of describing it.
The Shipibo have their own very special way of working with the plants and holding ceremonies, like you described, KASEY. I mean, there are so many tribes in the Amazon, from Peru to Brazil to Colombia, Ecuador, that they hold ceremonies in very different ways. And the Shipibo way is very quiet. So I remember when I came there in the Maloca, it's very inward. It's in the dark. you stay in your own, sitting in your own spot, and they smoke a lot of mapacho at the beginning of the ceremonies, especially, I mean, all throughout, especially at the beginning, to set the room, to purify the space, to then start singing the Icaros to each participant and into the room as well. So yeah, it's a very particular way. As I said, it's very introverted, it's very inwards. We'll also be talking about how, you know, about integration afterwards in relation to these experiences. What I really loved when I was there is that at the end of a session, so during the session, they come and sing the Icarus to you, especially in those areas they see there is like somehow something is off balance. So they will read your energetic imprint, just like you were saying, and then go and sing the Icarus in those areas to fine-tune your frequency. And I really like the fact that it's in the dark and not much else is happening around you. I mean, everyone is going through their own process, and sometimes it can be very intense for someone as well. But I mean, you know, and it can be quite big going on around you, but in comparison to other tribes, for example, the Brazilian tribes, where it's much more of an active ceremony and there's a lot more dancing and singing. These are quite quiet, the Shipibo ceremonies. They give you the opportunity to really, really go in, really go deep into your process. Other ceremonies do as well, but I like this style for that reason. You can go really deep in, no distractions, and then you get this sitting with the maestro coming in front of you and singing Icarus on you on those areas that we talked about. And another thing that's really great, that at the end of the session of the Icarus, they spray you this concoction of herbs, of plants that feels like a magic potion that they're spraying on you after to seal the work that they've done with the Icarus. And it's basically a concoction that's made of all the plants that they've done dietas with up to that point, which is really beautiful. So it's a lifetime of work that they have in that potion, because they start doing these dietas really early in life. And also, these are the plants that have given them the Icarus. So the whole idea, again, for listeners who are not familiar with this, with the dietas, is that you do a dieta with a plant for quite a while, and then the plant gives you so many gifts. And one of those gifts, especially if you're training as a maestro or to hold space and do healing for other people, can be an Icaro, can be a song. It's a healing song, which first of all, it's a healing song for yourself. And then it's a healing song that you can bring to other people too, to do healing on others, if that's your path and that's what you're doing. So you get these gifts, these healing songs. And so that potion that's sprayed on you is just a reminder of all this beautiful work that they've done with the spirits of the forest and all the plants. There are so many. And yeah, I think KASEY was you who told me this, that they're called the plant people. So in Peru, the people in the Amazon, most of the tribes in the Amazon are called the plant people. And the people that reside in the Andes, the other tribes, they tend to be called the stone people because they work more with the stones. I've done another episode with another teacher who teaches the Clara medicine wheel, which is one of those kind of healing systems coming from the Andes, from the Inca. And they work with mesas, which are portable altars, where they put stones and they work with stones. They also have wachuma, the cactus, which is an entheogenic plant that they work with there in the Andes. And they also work with a lot of other plants as well. But there is this differentiation of the landscape where the people in the Amazon are called the plant people. And they really work so intimately since they are kids with the plant spirits to do healing, again, as I was saying, first of all on themselves and then bring it to other people afterwards. And so talking about plants and talking about dietas, let's move on to that. You've done a few dietas, KASEY, so I'd really like you to tell us a little bit more about some insights from those dietas and how they've helped you deepen your healing.
So these plant dietas, so we do them here as at La Medicina as Westerners, but to the Shipibo tradition, it's the way, like you're describing, it's the way that they deepen their practice with the plants. It's how they learn. It's also how we learn about ourselves, about hopefully, peeling back those layers so that we can actually listen a little bit deeper to our own intuition, but then to the energetics of the plants, because everything has some type of energetic, it has some type of frequency within it. So in these processes, it depends on the family lineage that you work with, because each family has a little bit of a different way, but there's always a stripping of stimulants, a stripping of food, there's isolation, and there's working with a particular maestro or maestra, like a healer, that's basically your teacher throughout the time. That is the only person you have contact with. And these typically take a minimum of 2 weeks, but it can go several months up to several years, depending on what it is you want to learn about yourself. But the typical way is at least, 2 months in complete isolation, working with just your plant and working with your maestro. And there's usually some type of commitment on the back end for you to continue that process. Sometimes continuing to work with a specific plant, but a lot of it has to do with just having a very clean diet, physically, like the food you're intaking, but also with no types of stimulants, no types of sexual activity, no types of like, let's say, horror flicks or really intense news. And in the world at large, it can be a lot to kind of keep that out. But basically, we want to strip the body so that we can listen into the subtleties of the plants. And so here at La Medicina, we offer these 2-week dietas, and there's a prerequisite, which is very similar to doing any type of medicine work in the space. You really want to come into it with a clear mind, a clear heart, potentially with some intentions, but holding those loosely. But you want to have a reason as to why you want to embark with the plants in general, but specifically on a diet. Because the way we do them here in the lineage that we work with, we do 4 days, almost 5 days of dry fasting, where you're in isolation and you are not consuming water, not consuming food, but you are consuming a specific plant that the maestro provides for you. And it could be the roots, it could be the bark, it could be the leaves, it could be the flowers, it could be one, it could be many. It really depends on what it is you're trying to heal as a person. And so for myself, I've done a combination of all the above. I've done just one solid tree. I've done different flowers and barks and leaves. I've also done combinations, which the Shipibo call families. They believe that certain plants have it would be like companion planting in the realm of gardening or permaculture, where certain plants have certain nutrients that they provide for other plants. Therefore, they're like friend groups. And so they sometimes provide you with a concoction of friend groups so that you can benefit from multiple energies. It would be the same thing if you were to go to an herbalist or a doctor and they prescribe you a concoction or a different blend of medicines to help you heal, because not just one thing can help. So sometimes they give you a combination of plants and you are ingesting those plants for a few days. And then there's always ayahuasca ceremonies involved, where you're allowing yourself to go a little bit deeper into the healing process. You're paying attention to your dreams. You're paying attention to the world around you and the sounds. You're required in some ways to just listen and to be still. But output is really important, things that are coming out of you, but you don't want input. So there's no telecommunications, there's no reading of books, there's no conversating with others, because you want to really listen to yourself. So the diets are ways of diving in. Not only are they usually a plant that can help you physically with physical ailments, mentally or emotionally, or even spiritually help connect you to different things that you're working on. but they also allow you to really fine tune your relationship with herbal allies, with plants and plant medicine in general. Most of them are not psychotropic or entheogenic. Most of them are it would be like drinking chamomile tea and trying to understand what chamomile tea has to say to you. Because we understand by, science and its constituents help with relaxing the nervous system, and it helps calm us. And it's a very mild sedative in a sense. But also when maybe we drink it in a more ceremonial context where we're stripping ourselves of all these other things, maybe it teaches us a lullaby. Maybe we open up our dream space to dreams and ideas and thoughts that we never had seen before. And that's an herb that comes traditionally from both Europe and North America. And down here in the Amazon, there's over 80,000 medicinal plants. That's a lot of plants. And the Shipibo work with a couple hundred of them. And so they go into these spaces where they strip themselves, isolate themselves, and hopefully learn a little bit deeper about the medicine.
So yeah, what you were saying earlier on as well, which made me think about integration and about the first stage of integration, which is preparation, and clarifying why you want to do a dieta, why you want to do even a plant ceremony with Gromada ayahuasca. I mean, with a dieta, it's an even longer term commitment. So it's really, really important to know why. So it is for the ceremonies anyway. And I'm going to tie in with integration a little bit more about how to work with dietas through integration. And of course, preparation is the first stage, is where you set also the work that is going to come ahead. And there needs to be a really delicate balance there as well, because as much as it's important to gain clarity on the reasons why you want to do something, and as much as it can be very helpful and supportive to set intentions, it's also very tricky with intentions sometimes, because sometimes it's difficult not to turn an intention into an expectation or an attachment. And that's where, some work needs to be done to find a direction, a starting point, and get the intention as a starting point somewhere. You're calling in certain kinds of energies that you want to work with, and then stay open to whatever comes, whatever the medicine brings you, to whatever your soul brings you, really, because I see the medicine as a connector and an amplifier. Plant medicines, the plants are connecting us to what's already inside of us and to the wisdom of our soul, to the source, divine source that's inside. And they magnified the state that we are in so that we can see things more clearly as well. And we can see things differently too. Because, of course, what happens when we take psychedelic medicine is this kind of flux between the two hemispheres of the brain intensifies, and that's how we fire a lot of pathways and new pathways as well, and that's how we can shift perspective and see things in a different way. It's really on a more kind of scientific level and biological level. It's because of all these neurons that are firing much more when we take the psychedelic medicines. It's connection, it's the new connections that are made in the brain and in the rest of the body, because I don't want to prioritize the brain on the rest of the body. I think the whole body as, wisdom and information and teachings. So yes, so basically going back to what I was saying about preparation and intentions, it's about, like you were saying, keeping a flowing intention and keeping it open. But it's also very important to clarify what we're doing. And I would really wanted to highlight that as the first stage of integration, which is preparation. It can be so supportive to do that before you go into a plant medicine journey. And especially if you go into a dieta, which is weeks. And as you mentioned, there's a commitment afterwards as well, where you're stripping off like salt and other toxins from your diet and other things. And that gives you even more time, which is beautiful as well, that period after the dieta to do even more integration when you then go into your daily life and come back from the Amazon. So yes, so talking about dietas and talking a little bit more about you, something a little more personal about you, I'd like to ask you, could you tell us like about an insight that you had, or if, even a different kind of awareness that you gained through one of your dietas?
Well, I can share that I've been doing this work for 14 years. And about 7 years ago is when I came to Peru for the first time to do a specific dieta to understand why I was doing this work so deeply, so intensely, facilitating mostly for me was in underground communities with indigenous folks that were coming up from South America to North America, which I feel very grateful for. And I'm so grateful and thankful that they were actually coming up to the north to do the work. And I was getting curious about, where else can I go deeper within my process? How can I embody this work a little bit more? Why am I doing this? What is the next level of healing? So I had those types of questions and intentions going on for me. And the first plants that I dieted were actually ayahuasca vine and chacruna, but not as a brew, not as the medicine ayahuasca, but separately just as a tea, as an herbal concoction. And there was a little bopensana in it. So I had 3 plants for my little herbal remedy that I was given for 2 weeks straight with this one mestizo woman, which means mixed lineages of Peru. So she wasn't full Shipibo, but she had some Shipibo background. And so I did that, and it really helped me open up and answer those questions of, yes, I'm here to, be a bridge for herbalism, a bridge between healing and people that are seeking different ways and different alternatives, because my focus has always been whole body healing. And holistic healing is multiple facets, so emotional, spirit, and the learn that there's so much more to learn. So it became an open-ended question. But I'm currently also on a diet now. So here we are, fast forward 7 years of doing these intense diets about once a year. And for me, that seems like a good regimen. But I'm somebody who likes to go deeper with my own healing. And I want to understand why I do what I do. I want to get to the root and the source of what, physical ailments are, because I do believe that most physical ailments start in the mental and emotional bodies, in our mind, things that are unprocessed, emotions that are unprocessed. And if we don't we don't process these, I should say, they do turn into physical ailments. And so I like to keep stripping back those layers. And the diet that I'm on currently was the official 2 weeks was August, end of August into September, but I made a 3-month commitment. So I'm not eating certain foods right now. I'm not engaging in certain activities, which is fine and beautiful because I'm learning more about myself. And it brought me back to a topic around self-worth and self-love that I thought I had healed years ago through my beginning journeys of plant medicine, as well as regular traditional therapy, that I thought, 15 plus years of doing this work and, another 5 years of therapy, we're like, yeah, we're really good on those topics. But in that process of stripping and isolation, I realized, wow, there's still another layer. There's still another way of looking at this. It's gotten lighter and lighter and brighter, but there was still little remnants, little pieces floating around where I was like, okay, we got to make peace with that. And I can laugh a lot more at some of those topics. And my reactions are very different. And so it's hard to pinpoint, but what I can share is I have gotten a little bit deeper in my process. And I've learned the more that you do these plant medicines, the diets really help you go a little bit deeper, because you're making a larger commitment than a one night, activity, or 3-day, retreat, or not a 3-day retreat, a 3 ceremony retreat, or a 7-day, ceremony retreat. You're making this deeper commitment, not only when you show up to do the work with your healer, you're making a commitment on the back end to be like, okay, I'm really going to commit to these plants. I'm going to commit to my own discipline and pay attention. That's really what it comes down to. So I'm paying attention to my dreams, my space, and the world around me.
That sounds like a process that takes you really deep, like you were saying, especially with the dietas, because it's a longer commitment. And that word commitment really makes me think about integration, because the beautiful thing about having that window where you still need to be committed to the dieta afterwards as well, in terms of diet and things that you can or cannot do, gives you a real opportunity for even deeper integration, even bringing more awareness and consciousness to your process as you reintegrate into your daily life, into your usual environment that you're in, as you return from these dietas and as you return from the jungle as well. And as you were saying, it affects everything. You can work with your dream space. You can work with all these dimensions and these portals that have been opened up during your time in the dieta, in the jungle, or even if you didn't do a dieta, the time that you spent in ceremony, and the time that you spent in the jungle, because your body will fine tune to the environment and potentially show you new things and open new things that can all be worked on and cultivated afterwards as well through integration. And I like the fact that you mentioned the dream space as well, because it's a way of tapping right back into that space, basically sleeping. When we sleep, we go into a shamanic journey. That's at least how I see it personally. We go into an altered state of consciousness, and our psyche does regeneration and repairing work in some ways. We go to places to regenerate ourselves, because that's what sleep does and helps us do. At all levels, physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and then we return and we wake up. So it's such a beautiful space, the dream space, and I work a lot with that as well through integration with people afterwards to tap right back into that space of expansion and really working with your subconscious really as well. So yeah, I like what you were saying, and also what you mentioned about the deeper layers. And there's a point that I like to kind of talk about in relation to that, where you've done this work now for a long, long time, for years. And just listening to you, mentioned the fact that you saw something all of a sudden, something that you've already been working on for a long time. You saw something new in it that you could heal even more, or that you could integrate even more, whatever word you want to use for it. And there's an invitation there as well in reframing what deeper healing is. Yes, it's deeper healing, but it's also deeper connection. And it's quite easy to get into this mode of like, oh, I've got more healing to do, and it depends on what energy is behind that phrase, really, because if you see it as there's a way in which I can be even more connected to myself, my soul, source, the world around me, the universe, however you want to call it, that will have a certain resonance when you say there's more healing that can be done here. But if you look at it as in there's still something that's not quite right about me, that has a completely different effect on the psyche when you think about it that way. So just in terms of like deeper healing and deeper layers, it can be a process of discovery, of real feeling like this is an opportunity to be even more connected, and look how connected I am already in many ways, and now I can go even deeper into it with it. And the dietas are beautiful, especially for people who have already worked with plant medicine for a while, but also for people that have decided that that's their calling. I'm not saying they should do it just if you have worked a lot with plant medicine, but it's such a beautiful way for going a lot deeper with it. And I like this idea, of the deeper layers, as in more opportunities to be even more connected to what's always been there and what's trying to come through you, basically. So yes, so now let's talk about a little bit more about, again, in terms of your personal process. I'd like to ask you like a personal question about this. I mean, all this has been very personal anyway, but in terms of how did these dietas and this work with the plants have supported the way, not only the way that you do healing on yourself and for yourself, but also the way in which you hold space for others?
There's a couple things you were bringing up about integration just recently, and it's all part of that. For me, integration is embodiment. Like, how do we put all these pieces back together of this puzzle, not just with medicines, but in life in general? And for me, this question brings up, what kind of life do I want to live? Where do I see myself in this moment, in my future? How am I connected back to source? For me, nature is everything. And so being in a calm environment is really helpful in general in the world. Doesn't matter where you are, but having some kind of peace and sanctuary and quietness is so important, and being connected to nature even more so, which you can do. Yes, I live in the jungle, so I can walk out of my door and I'm in, hundreds of thousands of acreage of beautiful nature. And someone in the city listening to this might be like, well, I don't have that. Well, we do have a park. There's ways in which we can get back to nature. We can be, outdoors. We can make those little bit of times for ourselves. And to me, that's actually really important, because when we can detox our nervous system and we can regulate our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system and have like that moment, then one, we can show up for ourselves, but then we can show up for other people. And so through that process of me understanding things that I need for myself, I grew up in New York City. I lived in New York for almost 30 years of my life before I moved out to the West Coast and lived in the mountains and lived by the ocean. And then I moved, after about 10 years of that, moved down to the Amazon. I've been living in the Amazon. And so I learned in these processes that I love the city for its inspiration and its synergy and the people and the connectivity. But then I realized about myself through these medicines and different modalities, I need quietness. I need to be able to take care of myself. I call it radical self-care, where I check out of the day-to-day and I tune in to what's going on in here and take a little bit of quiet time. And the more I do that, the more I'm able to show up for others, not just here at the center, but in life in general, because I'm taking care of myself. And so doing these diets allows me to take care of myself in the process. It allows me to strip back more layers of me, learn deeper about the plants, which are such an ally to my path and what I do. But to the pharmacopoeia of the world, all of our modern medicine comes from plants and its chemical compounds. And so I'm reconnecting to these ancient ways of being. For hundreds of thousands of years. We've been connecting to earth and to plants and to the world around us. And we've forgotten that in modern times. And so for me, doing these diets allows me to strip back more layers of myself, dive deeper into the plants, study a little bit more the lens of the cosmos, because I'm not studying with anyone else but the energy of the plant medicine. In its tea and its form. And in that, it builds my own constitution for self-care. It builds my own mental, emotional constitution to understand more about my own psyche. And it allows me just to be like, okay, I got this for me, first and foremost, so that when I'm of service to others, be it with plant medicines, be it with an astrology session, be it with some breath work or yoga, I'm able to show up more presently and be like, okay, how are you? What is going on for you? And so on and so forth, because I'm doing my own work. So it's about that reciprocity and a balance.
There's so many good points about integration there, and it's so great to listen to your integration process. And exactly what you're saying, like when you mentioned that for you, integration is embodiment, that the very key things there is embodiment. And what is embodiment is being in the present moment and being connected, truly connected to our bodies. And that is connection to nature, because we are nature. And these are really kind of key things in the integration process afterwards as well. Like you were saying, spaciousness and silence, they can really support that embodiment. And obviously, I guess, when you're living in the Amazon jungle, it's easier to create those moments of spaciousness and silence. And one of the key things with the integration process afterwards is to slow down, even when you then come back to your everyday life. And it can be a challenge, especially if you live in a city, or even if you don't live in a city, but in kind of, especially in Western countries, we tend to have very busy lifestyles. And the whole point of doing this healing is so that we can listen to ourselves. And so I want to really point to that space that's created when we slow down, when there is silence and spaciousness, so that we can actually listen to to our inner voice and the voice of our soul. Because that's actually what the plants do. They're, as I was saying earlier, that's the way I see them, as connectors to what's already inside of us anyway. And then also that radical self-care that you mentioned, that's part of what really supports integration and what really supports a healthy lifestyle in general. Even is not specific to plant medicine or plant medicine integration or dietas, of that radical self-care, of really spending time connecting with the body, spending time in silence, in the quiet, creating space, that space to listen to ourselves. And something else that comes up when I mention that is that, it gives you the space to really connect to that innate evolutionary drive that we have. And that's what really supports growth and healing and transformation and integration. Because thinking about what you mentioned earlier about animism and how everything that's alive on the planet has that innate evolutionary drive, whether it's humans, animals, plants, elements, it's all imbued in this evolutionary drive that is on the planet, and we have it, and it's a matter of just making the space to tap into it, to be able to connect to it. And then we know what we need to do. We know which direction to go towards, and we don't even need to think it. It's just something, as I was saying, intrinsic, innate, that moves us towards growth and towards healing. And the body has that natural tendency to heal itself if we don't get in the way of it, and so does the psyche as well. So yes, beautiful points about integration, and I really like what you said, about embodiment and spaciousness as well. So going back to you now, I'd like to know what you think about the future of this work with plant medicine, and also about the future of the tribes in the Amazon.
I feel like we're living in a really interesting time where there's a lot of growth and expansion happening, and that's amazing. And I also think we need to keep our feet on the ground and stay a little bit rooted and firmly planted. I think it's really important to connect with peoples in our places where we live, and the medicines from our own countries. There's such a pharmacopoeia of plants in our backyard. Like I brought up chamomile earlier, specifically because it grows so wildly. It's almost like a weed that you can see like growing in your like yard or in your garden. And it's such a medicinal plant. And there are also, like I mentioned earlier, 80,000 plants that we know of right now in the Amazon. And it's important that we protect those plants, because I'd like to see how many more we can find. And so part of it is about doing our work at home and connecting with peoples, connecting with different folk traditions. There's so many people that live in the US, that live in Europe, that have these knowledge and ways that, would love to pass it on. And so part of it is getting, connected with local community and local peoples doing similar things, local farmers, like, so that we can keep the practices up. The other thing is, getting curious and supporting some of the causes out there that are protecting indigenous peoples here in South America and in other parts of the world and their lands, because there is a bigger power that tries to squish a lot of these things. And also the rainforest. Like this year, we were in a drought in the rainforest as a whole for the entire South America, which is funny to think about, but not at all. There were lots of fires and lots of devastation that is a real thing. So I'm grateful we're finally getting into rainy season. It's raining, that's helping. But a lot of that has to do with the lack of support around protection of the forest and the pharmacopoeia that exists here because of modernity. So part of it's about getting curious and protecting some of these ways, because just like with anything, there is a loss of knowledge that's taking place. So in one lens, it's really great that there's inspiration, there's conversations that are happening like this, and curiosity that's getting peaked for people to find alternative ways, because through that process, we wake up. We start to remember our roots, and we want to support the people who hold these knowledges, that hold this wisdom. But the wisdom resides within us. So I see what's taking place, like an awakening, an emergence of remembering, and a way to be, connected to nature, to connected to our other fellow humans, and to save some of these traditions. And I see that that's starting to happen now. There's a lot of wake up. There's a lot of curiosity, both in Europe and in the US. And even here in South America, I'm part of some activist groups out in the mountains of Cusco area that are all about permaculture and protecting the plants and writing lots of literature on it. So I think a lot of it is about, one, living by example for ourselves, like us committing to our own path, committing to our own personal healing, being that ripple effect in the world. Two, it's about getting curious about these traditions and understanding like where the medicine comes from. Who are the traditional keepers of the wisdom of these plants? Like, why do they do what they do? Understanding their customs, as opposed to trying to adapt it to our way of thinking, because it's some of the ways in which we think it should be done. I don't even like to use the word should, but it's like, oh, that's the way that, that's how we can use it. That's what we need to use it for. Well, let's put a pause on that. Is that even the way that the traditional peoples use these medicines? How do they grow them? What is it used for? Because sometimes it's used in a very different context than we use it at home. And that's why I said it's really good to get curious about the plants and the farmers and the people and the permaculture in your area, because there's such a rich source of knowledge. And there are, like I said, people who want to share it. So that's where I see this going. I see it people waking up to remembering themselves, remembering their culture, remembering the people in their own neighborhoods.
Yeah, and in terms of how to bring back the experience, how to bring it back home from the jungle, that connection with nature that you mentioned, it's a key thing. So one of the things is we're connecting more strongly with the nature around you, with local nature. And that's also a way of creating more space, going back to that spaciousness that we talked about before, moments of silence, moments of where you can hear yourself, or whether moments in which you're not distracted like in the usual ways. And that connection with nature as well is just something can really help your integration. Can be part of your integration plan, as much as community. Another thing that you mentioned too, connect with other people that are on a similar path, that are interested in similar modalities that you are. It's so important to be able to share and learn from each other, and that will have a domino effect. See this reconnecting in a much deeper way with yourself and others around you, and the environment as well. Can have a domino effect then in really kind of potentially even getting to save the Amazon rainforest and preserve areas of it so that tribes can keep living there as well. And then another thing that comes up when I think about it is this, what could be ways of reconnecting to the ceremonies, specifically to that as well. And then this idea of like rituals and ceremonies, and ritual and routines, comes to me. And that's another really important part of integration, and how you can consistently work with the experience that you've had in the Amazon and the jungle once that you come back home. And so you could even create some visual anchors in your house. If you have an altar, there could be something that could remind you of the ceremonial space. But it could also be other anchors, and visual anchors tend to be quite immediate, or other things. It could be even smells or something through the senses that reminds you of your intention for this work. So not just the intention that you had when you went into the ceremony, when you went to the jungle, but your overall intention for your life, for what you want to build into your everyday, consistently. And that really helps to have little anchors here and there, because that's how we do repatterning, right? And we work on the neuroplasticity part of it, part of integration. When we have constant reminders, and our mind goes there and the energy goes there, our attention goes to what we want to, kind of what we are creating. So I like to kind of clarify not what we don't have yet, but what we are actively creating in our lives and co-creating, with everything else. So having anchors can be really useful, little rituals, and then ceremony with others as well. They don't necessarily need to be plant medicine ceremonies, but ceremonies with others as well that kind of bring us close to community and this sense of something sacred, and this sense of gratitude for or being able to come together as well. There are so many different things that can really support the integration process once there's someone comes back from the jungle, and or if they're not, haven't gone to the jungle, once that you come back from a plant medicine ceremony as well. And then also there are times of the day where neuroplasticity is easier. The brain is more programmable first thing in the morning, last thing at night. So that's, again, if you want to put some routines and rituals in place, those would be good times as well to do it. But it can be done, of course, throughout the whole day. The intention as well is what really, really counts. So yes, so we are getting close to the end of this episode. So I'd like for you to tell us, how can people get in touch with you, and how can they learn a little bit more about La Medicina?
So I live in Tarapoto, Peru. We have a beautiful center called La Medicina. You can find us at our website, which is www.la-medicina.com. And we also have our social platforms on Instagram and Facebook, which is also lamedicina.peru. And we'd love to see you, answer any questions. We have ways you can always shoot me an email, or just check out what we're doing online.
Thank you again, KASEY, and thank you to our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's episode about the healing roots of the Amazonian jungle and the dietas. And I'm looking forward to seeing you soon again. Bye. Thanks for joining us today on the Psychedelic Integration Compass. You can find the link to the podcast website in the details below. If you enjoyed the episode, remember to like the video and subscribe to the newsletter to stay updated on what's coming next. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.